Hi there. I just want to do a talk, and I think this talk, I don't want to plan on what I'm going to say or what I'm going to talk about, but I think I want to talk about my spiritual awakening. Now, I like to go back and talk about this because it's very healing for me. These videos that I make sometimes, especially when I'm talking about my spiritual unexpected journey that happened at the age of 24. It's a very healing thing for me to talk about this, to go back and talk about it. And and when I'm doing these talks, I flow through the subject, so that'll probably happen. And what happened to me was, I've said this many times, and if you're new to this, you wouldn't have heard it, is that at the age of 24, I had an unexpected experience, out of the blue, an unexpected spiritual awakening. And I didn't know anything about this. I came from a travelling gypsy family that were psychics and things of that nature, fortune tellers and stuff. But there was nothing about the spiritual awakening. My mum didn't even know what was going on with me, and I didn't know. And out of the blue, I had this awakening, and it manifested not because of something separate, but because I decided, I sat down one day and decided enough to awaken. And I had enough of the way, and it was just my time to awaken, you could say. My time to go to the light, And then what starts to happen, I start going through this shift in awareness. And I didn't know what was happening, for weeks. And after a couple of weeks, I started to realize that I was going through a spiritual experience. I didn't know it was called a spiritual awakening. Then years later, I found out that that's what it was called, and that people probably throughout all of time have had these experiences because you've got a source, and there's a time to return to that source. And when you get films about heaven, and you get films like the film Ghost, for example, and you see heaven, that's a symbolic image of a spiritual awakening. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen in death when you're a spirit, because heaven is actually a state of awareness. And the spirit world, for example, my understanding of the spirit world from the spiritual awakening is because that's what you're interacting with. You're interacting with that part of you, the heaven part of you, in a spiritual awakening. And heaven is a state of awareness. And the spirit world is a lucid dreaming kind of reality where you're able to fix body parts and stuff. We have this life of limitation for limitation. But back to my spirit, I want to go back to the spiritual awakening, and obviously it was an amazing experience, but I'm still going through it. Once you have that awakening, you're now awake, and now you're basically self-awareness. That's what awakening is. You weren't self-aware before. You were a sleepwalker. And after the awakening, the perceptual illusion bursts, and then what starts to happen is you start going through this awakening process where you're healing for nearly about 9 years now, I think it is. And then all of a sudden, I'm manifesting all this knowledge. I mean, it's relentless knowledge. I wake up in the morning with so much new insights into all the subjects I talk about, and it's just endless. I mean, I've had people that have contacted me that have been in the spiritual path a long time on the internet, and some nasty people as well, and they come across as your friend, but they're trying to get information, and they haven't had that big awakening yet. And I've had people like this, and and it's because they're in their ego self, and to them it's about better or worse, or he's better than me because he's had the experience. But no, it's not. it's a power. My awakening is what's within everyone. But yeah, I've had people contacting me, and they come across, they say they're my friend, and then on the internet, and then they start turning, they start like trying to insult me, and that, like, the narcissist works in three stages. First the stage of being your friend, and then the stage of little subtle insults, and then big insults, because narcissistic people and people with that kind of big tendencies of narcissism, have to bring you down to bring them up, because they don't have a lot of self-love and self-confidence. That's why they behave like that. They just act like they're confident, but they're not. I've learned about self-confidence. I never had any confidence before this awakening. And I'm able, like today, for example, I was thinking to myself, I actually like myself now. I've actually got confidence now. I've actually got self-love now. Where before this awakening, there was none of that. I really didn't like myself. I probably looked a lot better when I was younger, but there wasn't a lot of self-love there. And this path has really helped me, but it's a long process. Anyone can do what I done. All I done was I decided enough was enough, and I sat down one day. I remember it. I sat down, and enough is enough, and then I started going through it. And when you're ready, you awaken. Awakening is just deciding that enough's enough, and letting your inner guidance lead the way. And of course, anyone can, like I say, decide to do that. But most people in their ego self think that the external world has something for them, and they continue to look and continue to look, because they believe their ego has convinced them that what's within isn't good enough, and they're not good enough. And this is a horrible thing to tell yourself. It's like I was saying last week about MDMA. If you research MDMA and the feelings that people have on it, it's the same thing as mindfulness. It's the same thing as spiritual awakening. And the reason normal people don't access it is because the ego's in the way. When people take MDMA, they say that the ego's pushed aside, and that now they're able to love, and that's what's happened. That's what happens once you make that decision to go within yourself and to spiritually awaken. That's when you spiritually awaken. Once you decide to let your inner guidance lead the way, your intuition, then you start going through it. But like I say, the ego self is a problem. But like I say, once you decide to awaken, that is when you wake up. It's all to do with an inner decision thing. And it's within everyone. It's like psychic. Everyone's a psychic within them. The power that's within me is the same thing that's within you. We're no better or worse. The skin colors are just to experience reality. You need a vessel, a body to experience it, but we're the same thing. And all this race and people looking at themselves for their race is all nonsense to get you to be racist. We're all basically the same infinity. If you think of it, there's infinite ways to do things. There's infinity, right? Even if you just ponder on that for a moment, you realize there's infinite ways to look at things. There's infinite ways to do things. There's at least billions of ways to do things on this planet alone. And that's why it's crazy when someone's dead set in their ideas. It's like me talking right now is a perspective, but there's billions and more possible perspectives on planet Earth. So that's why, it's like what Socrates once said, that all I know is that I know nothing. And that is the truth. I don't know anything. But like I say, I've had so many people, like people that have done courses on the spiritual path, that are like hatred, towards me because of this awakening. But that's because they're in their ego self, and they perceive me to, or they imagine better or worse. But once that ego self starts dying away in a spiritual awakening, you stop thinking like that. I used to think like this. I used to think that better or worse, and I used to get depressed. I haven't had depression now for nearly 5 years. And it melted away, because once I started going through that spiritual awakening, the ego starts dying. You start to perceive that you're one. and that everything is actually in fact you, and that all this separation and ego things is just nonsense. It's just programming. Even the self is a programming. You know, the self is based on all the information you've received in your life. If you never had that information, you probably wouldn't have any sense of self, right? And this is what's happening in a spiritual awakening. You have that awakening, and you can do it right now if you decide to. If you decide to go within your heart space and let that lead the way. But when you're going through it, you're realizing there's no right, no left, there's no ways, and this is when you're entering the enlightened stage after a lot of spiritual awakening process stuff, and then you're entering nirvana, which is, like I said earlier about heaven, it's a state of awareness. It's not a place. And I was saying earlier also about the spirit world, the afterlife. This path it opened me up to this, and it's when you die, it's not like you're going to become an angel. You're going to become whatever your awareness is in this life, and that will excel itself relentlessly in death. So if you're full of love, then that's what you'll be. But don't go thinking people are angels when they die, because healing is a long process. You know, we're just awareness. That's it. We're just awareness. It's just awareness. You've got awareness and you've got non-awareness, and nothing is non-awareness and something is awareness. That's it. But again, that's one perspective I'm really coming away with, but there's billions more on this planet, so what do I know really? But yeah, it's like I say, you know, how to go through this awakening of mine is, like I say, it'll happen when you decide to go within yourself, to go within your heart space. And I think I'm just going to leave it there. And if you're watching, you're meant to watch it, everything falls in divine order. I always say this. You are infinity and all is within you. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you.